brothers my guys, know that they fly, know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side, CJ Ike, now I gotta roll with ice. Oh, these brothers my guys, know that they fly, know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side, CJ Ike, now I gotta roll with ice.
Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Paul with Spheric Reptiles, and I thank you so much for tuning in to this video on how to determine if your reptile is healthy. I think that's very important for you to do that constantly, not just when you're buying the animal or before you feed, but to kind of, consistently. So what you should do is consistently check your animals every time that you're holding it. It should be a literal physical exam of sorts where you're looking at the conditions in which they live in to make sure that they're sterile and there's no pathogens that can cause disease, as well as checking the animal's body composition and their overall well-being in determining whether they're healthy or not. That's the best way to use preventative measures so that your snake or your reptile will live a long and healthy life. I mean, that's what the goal is, right? You don't want to have an animal that has the potential to live a long life, and that life is cut short because of something that you did or something that you could have prevented. So that's what this video is for. And we're going to cover 10 things again. I like using the number 10 so it can be a checklist so that you can write it down. And we're going to go ahead and start with the first thing, the appetite. So in general, your reptile should have a very good appetite. So if the animal is healthy and everything is working perfect, then that animal has a very good food response. And that's if you're not overfeeding. So you have to do your research again to determine what that bell-shaped curve of feeding would be. So you don't want to go too much and make your animal obese, and you don't want to go too little to where your animal's starving all the time. But you want to find that happy medium to where your animal isn't gaining excessive amounts of weight, nor is it losing excessive amounts of weight, but it's still healthy. And it's going to have that good feeding response. Now, on the flip side, if your animal is unhealthy, then it will not have a good feeding response. In fact, that doesn't mean that your animal is unhealthy if it doesn't eat occasionally. So if your animal's in shed, or if it's just that time, like if you have an animal that brumates, or if you have an animal that prefers a specific type of food and you're trying to offer it something that's not its normal food item, then that doesn't mean your animal's unhealthy. If you're feeding your animal the diet that it normally eats, and then all of a sudden it switches off and it just looks like it's just not interested in food at all, then that could be a sign of unhealthiness. So that's just one way you can tell. Doesn't mean that your animal's unhealthy if it doesn't eat initially, but if it's over a prolonged period of time, it can lead to question. All right, so number 2, activity level. Activity level is a big key in determining your animal's health. Now, so if you keep ball pythons, which is what the majority of the animals that we keep are, then you know that your ball pythons are hiding for the majority of the day. But I can guarantee you that at some point during that day, that animal is active. Rarely will that animal just be inactive for 24, 48, 72 hours straight. In the case of our bearded dragon and our boa constrictor, they're always active any time of the day. The boa constrictor might come out in the daytime, it might come out at night, but there's a time when this animal is going out and getting exercise, and that's what I'm saying. So if your animal is active and moving around and investigating and doing all these other things like that, then that's a very good sign that your animal is healthy. Now, if your animal is drawn in, is hiding for a consistent amount of time outside of brumation, that might just raise some questions that should have you thinking that I should investigate more, I should research the cause of this. So charting how long has this happened, at what times of the day, so that way you can get a feel for what's going on, and so that if you have to go to the vet, then you have, just like when we go to the doctor, you'll have a list of things, the cause and effect, the feature and the benefit. You see what I'm saying? So that you can get a better treatment for your animal. Number 3, so your animal should have clear and bright eyes. I mean, outside of shedding, your animal should always have clear and bright eyes. If your animal the eyes look sunken in, then or a little bit dry, what you would want to do probably is soak the animal first to make sure that it's not dehydrated, because these are reptiles. They don't always know how to go to a water bowl and drink. So if you have a species, especially like a bearded dragon, that lives in an environment that normally does not have water, that doesn't mean that they don't have water, but bearded dragons really just don't drink from water bowls. They're not a big water bowl drinker. Now, they might drink from a dripping system, What we do is we mist ours down a lot, but you could actually soak this animal, and in doing so, you could actually bring this animal back up because they're going to absorb water through their scales. They'll drink the water then because they're submersed in it, and through their cloaca, they'll absorb water as well. Because it's just the way that they're designed that they can absorb water from their environments. So that could be one thing that you could see. Now, if the eyes are swollen, that could be the cause of infection. That could be the cause of, like, say, if they were in a bioactive enclosure and an animal happened to try to bite on them and they could be allergic to something in the environment. That just proves more of the reason why you should actually just kind of look at your animal and the conditions every time that you interact with your animal, whether it's feeding, changing the water, or cleaning out excess feces. For number 4, guys, and I think number 4 is really good. So the scales of your animal, and I always almost say skin, but it's scales. So the scales of your reptile should be smooth, tight, compactly layered. It should have like a not a tough, but a very consistent and firm feel to it. So if the scales are tight and intact, that's a good thing, right? And if they're smooth, but if you notice any of the scales are really like not tightly packed or kind of loose or something that's outside of the norm from what you normally see, which further proves why you should interact with your animals all the time, right? So that you can tell if something's different, then that could be a sign of a problem. So that problem could be either like mites, parasites, anything like that that could be in that environment that is causing that animal to be stressed to where they're just not shedding correctly, or it could be something that's actively harming that animal. It could also be the feeding. So if the animal's not eating, then those scales won't be as healthy, right? If that animal is dehydrated, then those scales will not be healthy, right? So those are, it kind of, everything just kind of flows. So the appetite, then you have the activity level, then you have clear, bright eyes, then you have the scales. So now as we move on, you can get to put together the full picture of what it would take to actually make sure that you know if your reptile is healthy or not. Number 5, now shedding is probably the best predictor of your animal's health. I mean, because when you get that shed, if it's a complete shed, then you can actually see that your animal is healthy, that it's hydrated, because if an animal is dehydrated, the shed will be incomplete. If the animal is hydrated, it's more likely that the shed will be complete. Now, there's a disclaimer. When I had big animals, so when I had a yellow anaconda, a Burmese, and a retic, they don't always shed off their skin in one part. In fact, those animals shed off their skin in parts, and so it'll be a lot of pieces. But as long as that shed is complete, that's a healthy sign. So that's one of the things that you can look for. And then once that animal has shed, you can check out the new skin and make sure that it's, that's the best version of the animal, since that's their new skin, literally their new skin. So you can actually look at those scales and make sure that they're tightly compact. And then at the edge of the underbelly of snake scales, when they're mature, there's a very thin layer there that you can actually see, and it should be opaque and clear. It's kind of like almost like a covering for the scales. And so if you can see that, then you know that your animal's healthy. If you don't see that, or it's kind of not there, then you know that your animal might still have some issues. All right, so for number 6, and now we've made the turn, so now we're going to go into more of the things that would probably cause your animal issues. And the first one would be respiratory infections or their respiration rates. So your animal should have a normal respiration rate. And I encourage you, find out the anatomy of your animal. So like, where are the lungs? Where's the heart? Where's the stomach? Where's the gallbladder? Learn where all of these things are, so that if you're going to be thinking about looking for something or looking up the signs, it's better to know where the organs are, so that if you are, checking out an animal for a respiratory infection, that you're not grabbing it where it's supposed to be breathing. So if you grab it where it's supposed to be breathing and you restrict it at that level, of course the breathing will be labored. But anyway, for a respiratory infection, if you notice any like liquid discharge, or if you notice excessive saliva in the mouth of the animal, whether it's a snake, a bearded dragon, a monitor lizard, you name it. If it's like saliva that's running out. Now they're supposed to be clear and pink on the inside of their mouth, and you can check a lot of different things there, but you should not hear any wheezing or any type of raspy breath. You know, they can exhale. Let me let you know that they can take deep breaths, but if you notice a struggled breathing rate or a sound, then that is definitely an issue that you should look at your husbandry first and make sure that your temperatures are right, the humidity is right, that there isn't an excessive amounts of either one. So you don't want excessive amounts of heat, nor do you want excessive amounts of no heat. But if you're going to make the mistake on the side of less heat versus more heat. If you don't want an overly saturated, wet environment. You want an environment that is kind of damp, but it gives that animal the opportunity to get away from that dampness or go to that dampness. So if you have that range, then that's great. But if it's overly saturated and that's causing your animal to start wheezing, then that's an issue. And that's something that you could actually fix with husbandry. Maybe you'd want to switch out all of the substrate at that time and take your animal to the vet to get it checked out for the respiratory infection, because that can actually lead to death. All right. So for number seven, right? Not 2, but 7. Body weight and condition. I don't know how many people actually pay attention to that, because I think that this is one of the things that is something that we do as keepers. We tend to want to feed our animal more and more. I'm thinking that if they keep eating, that it's a good thing, but you got to realize that these animals are all, most of them are opportunistic feeders. So in the wild, when they see something, they eat it. So if they run across a burrow of rats and there's rat pups in there, they're going to eat their fill before they move on. They're not going to eat one and be like, oh yeah, that's the thing. But you also got to remember that the only reason that they're doing that is because food isn't just readily available as if it's in a grocery store out there. It's hard for animals to come across these animals, one, that they can eat, and 2, that's the appropriate size for them to eat, and 3, that won't eat them, right? So this is one of the reasons why your animals will eat every time that the food is offered, but this can also lead to, well, most of the time, but this can also lead to fatty tissue that increases the risk of them having health issues and dying prematurely. If an animal is healthy, it will have tight scales, there will be no scale separation, and there won't be excessive fatty bulges. So you can tell if your animal is fat if you look at the spine of it and it's kind of coming up onto the spine. It's like they're not lifting weights, so it shouldn't be a reason for them to have excessive muscle tissue in areas where they shouldn't, like especially around the spine. You should be able to rub your hand along the spine and feel the spine. Now, if you can't, or if it feels like it's just, too fat in that area, then that's an issue and your animal might be overweight. So I would encourage you also to weigh your animal all the time. Not all the time, but once a month, just to check and see if your animal's weight is good or not. In snakes, you can tell if an animal has been power fed for a long period of time because the body will be gigantic. And we're not talking about a blood python, but even those are proportional if you know the species of blood pythons. But if you look at most snakes, that head on that animal will be very small in comparison to the body, which means that the snake has just been overfed by so much to where it kind of throws off the imbalance of the ratio of the head to the body. So if you know that, like for a boa constrictor, the head should be muscular. For a ball python, when they're adults, the head should be muscular, but never is it disproportionate to the body. They're always proportional. So if you look at them as hatchlings, there should be some resemblance of them as they reach that juvenile stage, as they reach that subadult stage, and they reach that adult stage. Never should it be lopsided in one way or the other. Some of the ways you can tell if your snake is overweight is that it'll be very lethargic. So again, going to that activity level, remember all these things flow down. If you look at that, if your animal is lethargic and it has no activity level, and you look at it and it's kind of overweight, you can tell if your animal's overweight. If you look at other animals and compare it, then you're like, man, my animal is like twice the size. Well, it's twice the size because you just made it that way. So you can put your animal on a diet at that point. It's not going to hurt it. It's probably going to appreciate it. It might still have a food response, but it's okay. So if your animal is thin, so if you're looking at the body composition and you notice that your animal is thin, once again, you'll notice sunken eyes, you'll notice scales that are not as healthy. You'll notice excessive folds in the animal's skin, especially around the rib areas. You'll notice that along the spine, it looks very emaciated, and it looks really almost like it looks like it's been starving. So if your animal is either off food, so if we go to that feeding response, and so now it's led to a body composition that leads it to be very thin, and now you're weighing it for the body weight, and you see that it's lost, 25, 35, 45% of its original body mass, then that's an issue, and you should go to the vet immediately for this animal, because they are actually fighting to stay alive at that point, and you should actually seek out professional help. Number 8, I think, is one of the things, a lot of these things we can control, but for number 8, we're going to talk about their behavior. So if your animal is basking and it's going through the day investigating its cage, and it's hiding, it's searching for food, when it sees you, it's alert, it's kind of tracking you. I don't know if it's in a food response or, hey, there's my guy, then, that's a good thing. So if your animal is going through a normal behavior cycle that you've paid attention to and you notice, then that's a great thing. But if your animal ever stops and if there is a sudden change, and that's what I'm talking about. So if all of a sudden your animal goes from investigating to just hiding for, days on end, and it's not brumation season, but your animal is just not wanting any part of it, or it looks like it's always in shed, the sheds are always incomplete, and it's not feeding, then, and that's more of the cause and effect. That wouldn't be all of a sudden, but any of those things, if it's all of a sudden or if it's a gradual change, if you're paying attention, first thing you should do is check your husbandry after you check out the snake. Well, you check out the snake and you see if the snake has mites, you check the feces, you check all of these things, and if you notice that the behavior is just not right, then you should probably strip down to the bare essentials. So take your animal away from that enclosure, quarantine it so you can actually investigate it, watch it. Maybe you want to set up a camera so that you can actually track this animal, weigh this animal probably daily. And of course, if it's something that's very significant that leads to the loss in body weight or no appetite, then, or if it has parasites, seek medical attention from a veterinarian. Of course, do your research before you go in so that you can kind of have an idea as to what are the problems. But if you've been charting everything, so it would just help. And so you see the flow chart that I'm giving you guys as to how to actually determine if your animal is healthy. What you're doing in a sense, even though we're at number 8, is you're making a list of things that you can actually chart for an animal. If you do it once a month or every time you feed, and that way if something is off, you can notice from 1 month to the next, or 1 week to the next, or one feeding to the next, or one day to the next, what your animal's state of being is. Number 9, 9, let me hold up all these fingers, right? It's hard. I never counted with my fingers, I always counted. I was told that was wrong, so I just never did it, so I never knew how to hold up my hand. But anyway, so check the feces, guys, for number 9. The feces should be solid, right? It should be solid, it should have some odor, but not a lot. So if you have animals, a lot of time reptiles will either poop in copious amounts, like the big snakes will poop in copious amounts. If you have one of the colubrids, they'll feces everywhere, poop everywhere. But in particular, with ball pythons, with the majority of ball pythons, boas, bearded dragons, chameleons, they're going to poop in one area where you can find it, right? And I think the other ones do too. It's just more of it. The bigger the animal, the bigger the shit. Look at this feces every time. Don't ever just get it and just throw it away. You want to make sure that you don't see anything crawling out of it, that it has a consistent texture. It sounds like talking to someone that's older, right? Like me. You want to make sure that it's not overly smelly and a different smell. And if it has a way to separate the urates from the actual brown feces, then you want to check the urates as well. You want to look in them, make sure that they're consistent. And this is important because this will determine whether your snake was fed a rodent that was not healthy, if your animal ate an insect that wasn't healthy, or if your animal has parasites, and if it's on a regular basis. So our animals should be defecating sometime after they eat, right? So, and that time really never changes over the course of their life if everything is working correctly. So I know for our ball pythons, our boa constrictors, now Fred's different, our bearded dragon, because he doesn't always eat every day. We don't feed him every day because in the wild they don't eat like that. They're just not gluttons. But we noticed that for our ball pythons, that if we feed them, our boa constrictor, if we feed it, then 3 or 4 days later, it's pooping. It might be 5 days later, but at some point, depending on the animal, their digestive system is going to kick that out, kick the shit out. And then at that point, I'll check the feces. So I already kind of know when they are going to have this feces, and I'll check it out. All right, so for the very last thing, and I know a lot of people, I left it as this at number 10 because I know a lot of people just really don't want to go there, but you got to check your animal's mouth, no matter what the animal is, because that's where a lot of the health lies. So if you are looking for a respiratory infection, you got to check the mouth. If you're trying to see if there's something wrong with your animal's teeth, you got to check the mouth. But either way, get comfortable in doing that. I would say if you have a hatchling or a baby reptile, start out when they're younger, so that way it's not so traumatic on them. And every time you hold them, just kind of mess with their mouth, mess with their entire bodies, because if you need to check them out, just like with dogs or cats, if you need to check them out, you don't want to get bit or have an animal go into a crazy response. So if you do something that's usual, that you start and you develop the habit of doing a pattern, then that animal's more likely to allow you to do it, even to the point of assist feeding if you have to. But the mouth should be clear and free of any type of discharge, odor. It should be, the gum line should be pink or whatever that natural color is that you've researched for their gums. The tongue flicks should be consistent. There should be no raspiness or no popping or wheezing noise coming out of the mouth. I mean, these are just a lot of things that you can pick up from just using your senses of sight and sound. And just with a little bit of investigation, if you do see something, it's always good to take a picture of it. And that way, if you ever have to seek medical attention, then you have a photo to show of when it started and then how it actually may have progressed. And that'll help the veterinarian make a better diagnosis and determine a treatment for you as well. I hope that this video was helpful to you. Please let me know what you think. And if you liked it, like the video. And if you would like, I would appreciate that you subscribe to the video as well. But again, this video is for people that just want to keep their animals healthy. There's no agenda here. It's just, I just want people to have healthy reptiles. And I think that's what this is all about. The pattern morphs and everything, that's something different. That's a side thing. But in general, it's just about keeping the animals healthy, because if we're not keeping them healthy, then what are we doing anyway? So, but I thank you so much again. And as always, guys, enjoy the time that you spend with your reptiles and enjoy the time that you have with your family. Thank you.